So welcome everyone again. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Taylor Dominguez. I am the Community Training and Education Manager here at Arizona State's Office of Community Health Engagement and Resiliency. So our goal here at OCHR is to co-create interventions with communities that focus on inherent strengths and assets that promote resiliency. So our goal is to provide culturally relevant trauma-informed trainings and resources specifically for community health workers, but also other health professionals as well. And the topics that we focus on are toxic and traumatic stress for children, youth, and families. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. So we'll make sure that all of your questions get asked, and Jen and Glenda, they have an engaging presentation today as well. So we really encourage you to just engage with us in chat as well. So you can ask questions in chat or the Q&A. For any other comments, you can use the chat function, and we also do have live Spanish language interpretation that's brought to you by the Tucson Language Justice Collective and our two amazing interpreters, Natalia and Mari. So if you would like to use the Spanish channel, you can click the interpretation button on the Zoom control panel, which is found at the bottom of your screen, and you will select Spanish. So today our webinar topic is on trauma-informed mindful gardening as a mental health benefit. And our presenters are Jen Parlin and Glenda Garcia. And I would like to introduce them both before I turn the time over to them. So Jen is the assistant agent for Pima County Cooperative Extension's The Garden Kitchen. The Garden Kitchen is a seed-to-table whole health program focusing on health equity in food systems and early childhood programming. Jen has been with the extension for over 13 years, has a master's degree in public health, and serves as state lead for mental wellness in family health and consumer sciences for Arizona Cooperative Extension. We also have here with us today Glenda Garcia. She is the program coordinator and ECE specialist with the Garden Kitchen program. She has over 25 years in the field of health, physical activity, and nutrition, and joined the Garden Kitchen in 2017. This has been a perfect program to nourish her passion for supporting and guiding communities towards equitable and whole health choices, resources, and education, as well as working on collaborative ventures which bring us closer to making a positive difference in our community. And we're so excited to welcome you both here and learn from you today. And so I am going to pass the baton over to you all.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Jen will kick us off with giving a little introduction of our program.
Thank you. And Glenda, if you could just put that on presentation mode, that'd be great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Taylor, thanks so much for inviting us here. Like Taylor said, Glenda and I help to run the Garden Kitchen program. We are seed to table whole health programming, mostly for our home county, Pima County, Arizona, but we also do some statewide programming too. We see audiences all the way from early childhood, 0 to 5, and their caregivers and their families, as well as teachers and training staff. Then we see folks that are 18 plus, and all different kinds of places, senior living, the VA, lots of different kinds of places. I think at last count, we were helping to support about 35 gardens in town, but at a variety of different locations and working toward a variety of different things. Glenda, could you start us on the second slide, please?
I apologize. It's going in the wrong direction for me, and I don't know why.
It happens.
Yeah, I cannot. Give me half a second here.
Okay. While Glenda's fixing our technology issues, I did just want to say that we do have a statement of diversity and inclusion through cooperative extension. And then we also have a land acknowledgement that I will read. We respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being the home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through educational offerings, partnership, and community services. Thanks. If
There we go.
not familiar with cooperative extension, there should be a cooperative extension office in all of the counties, no matter where you are. And the mission really of cooperative extension is to bring everything that's happening at the university to the people, hopefully to better their lives. So I would say in thinking about gardening and thinking about trauma awareness and thinking about all of those different kinds of topics, certainly reach out and see what services are available through your cooperative extension office or as a statewide network of cooperative extension offices. Most of the services are free usually or at a low cost, and oftentimes they are looking to partner with organizations such as yours. Next slide, please, Glenda. Great. So why do we think that gardens and green spaces benefit mental wellness? As Taylor said, Glenda and I would love for this to be more of a discussion than just a lecture. And so please do feel free to chime in on the webinar chat. If you've been to a green space or a garden or been part of any of those things and found it to be helpful to your mental wellness, tell us about that. Why did you feel like that was the case? And why are we looking to have gardens at all at our spaces? I know some of you have to. Oh, perfect. Calming and grounding helps us to be present. Garden at home to connect with the kiddos. Absolutely. Creative and life-affirming direction of energy. Beth, I love that. Collaborative with others, connecting with the web of life. I love all of those things. Those are also true. We have some quotes up here from references. Nature teaching us about healing and growing, outdoor activities, getting your hands in the dirt, 2 large greenhouses, getting our hands in the dirt, a lot of getting our hands in the dirt, growing pineapples. Fantastic. Thanks everyone for chiming in. We all, I think, probably have some experience with a green space that helps us to feel more mentally well, and also gives us an opportunity to use our physical bodies and feel peaceful and a real whole health benefit. Evidence does suggest that exposure to green spaces can improve mood and reduce the risk of mental disorders. And in a few studies, we saw that community gardeners had significantly better health outcomes than their neighbors that did not engage in using those green spaces. I love this, connecting with nature, relaxing. Yeah, so we have a lot of these feeling words when we're talking about gardening. And so you all already know that mental wellness and green spaces and gardens really go hand in hand. Next slide, please, Glenda. Thank you. So I don't want anyone to be dissuaded from thinking about a garden, but as our gardeners on this chat already probably can attest to, a garden does take continuous energy and financial support and capacity. And so really be clear as a first step, why is this space that you have best served as a garden? Why shouldn't it be something else? Could it be a playground, a pathway? Could it be a different kind of green space that also achieves what you're trying to achieve without having to have continuous financial support or energy? I don't want anyone to feel dissuaded, but when you're very, very clear about the goal and why this should be a garden instead of something else, it's a lot easier to have buy-in and get other people on board with you because you're very clear. Or you've had a group of people get together and say, no, you know what? It should not be something else. It absolutely should be a garden. We heard from our residents, our customers, whoever it is, that really like a garden, and then thinking about what kind of garden is that going to be. Not every garden is there to grow food, right? And so maybe it's for colors, maybe it's for succulents, maybe it's for food. It could be a range of different things, but it's really good to make sure that you really do want the responsibility of a garden. Yes, it could be an herb garden, it could be a flower garden, it could be a pollinator garden. Yes, gardens do indicate intentionality. I love that. Thanks, Grace. I just think that it's a very important thing to be very clear about that this is going to be a garden and then what kind of garden you want this to be so that then you can be very mission oriented in how you approach planning and implementing this garden. Next slide, please, Glenda. So the planning process, I would say the planning process is the most important part of this process. This is how you're going to make sure that your garden is welcoming and that everyone is on board, getting the buy-in and support from whoever it is that is part of this group. You'll want to make sure that they're part of this planning so that they all have ownership over it. Do you all have ideas or thoughts on why it's so important to have a good plan about your garden? And what is important to plan during this? Plants, though you're seasonal, yes. Knowing your ecosystem, knowing what plants grow in each season. We don't want to be disappointed, right? We don't want to invite pests into the garden because we're growing things in the season that's not right for it. Absolutely. Planting calendar, making sure you have water, equipment, people to support. Yes, absolutely. Knowing appropriate grade level. Definitely. So you want to make sure that this is appropriate for the audience that you want to engage in this garden. Shared responsibility. Oh my gosh, I hear all of that. Just making sure that you're going to be able to water this garden and it's not going to be very difficult is an important factor. Is there going to be runoff into this garden from a space that, especially if you're growing food, that you don't want there to be runoff from? So really think about your plan in this. We've included our garden planning checklist as part of the handouts that you all are getting. But there's a lot of things on there that is talking about buy-in, right? And so we want to make sure that our maintenance crews, our facilities crews, our principals, our directors, whoever it might be, is really bought into this and will continue to support this garden. If we're thinking about an in-ground bed, have we blue staked? Have we tested the soil for contaminants? Do you have labor to help with the install of this garden and for the maintenance? What are the goals of the garden, like we talked about before? What do you want to achieve with this? Is it about mental wellness in that people get their hands in the dirt? Is that about storytelling? Is that about some other goal that you have? How will people work in the ongoing project? That's the thing about a garden. If you were doing something like a playground, it would just be installed and then people go and use it. But a garden needs this continuous support from everyone. And that's really a nice thing about our mental wellness too, because it helps us to be part of this community that cares for this shared space. We also have on there, if you are doing a food garden, how will the harvested produce be used? Who will get to use that and take it home? Making sure we feel like it's equitable and that folks all feel ownership and successful when they're participating. And then if you do need it, what kind of ongoing support will you need from outside sources, from your cooperative extension office, from the city council, whoever that might be, just so that you can start to engage those folks right up front. Glenda, next slide. So hopefully you're going to be going on vacation at some points, right? And so having a crew of folks that are really part of this process and part of this commitment is going to be very helpful. It's also going to be probably very hot and probably very cold during the times that you will have this garden. And so you want to make sure that you are set up for success and you have that support ongoing. Next slide, please, Glenda. We want to make sure that your mental wellness is protected. I am sure everyone on this call already has a job that they're doing outside of a garden that they would like to have. And so make sure that you aren't taking on too much and that you're able to be enjoy this garden, not just as a responsibility, but you're able to take part in the mental wellness of this garden too. We often try to have garden champions. Does anyone already have folks that are sort of the garden champion at a space that you might have a garden at? A few folks did mention shared responsibilities too. And so this is really the garden champion for us, is the person that makes sure folks feel welcome to participate and that they feel like a valued member of this community. This helps to protect everybody's mental wellness and gives us a boost, and also make sure that there's some shared responsibilities so that not everything falls on you, so that you can go on vacation and have a sick day when you need it too. Glenda, I think I'm passing it over to you. You're muted.
Okay, there we go. I think I got it now. And for whatever reason, I can no longer see the chat and the screen at the same time. So if we have some chat, if you might help me with that.
I've got you.
I appreciate it. So I don't know what happened. Technical difficulties again. Yeah, so we were talking about all of the different things to kind of consider as far as having a garden and what it takes to have a garden, especially when you do want to make sure that it's not going to impose and create more stress because of the work that's in it. So we're going to go over a couple of things that you might find important to consider when installing, creating, and then maintaining a garden that's going to be helpful for your mental wellness. Does anybody know what, other than what, the typical buy-in and materials, is there anything else that you might consider before creating this this garden that's very specifically going to be for that green space, for that mental wellness, whether it's for yourself, for your kids, for your clients, for your community?
Taylor, we had a question in the Q&A that says that the chat was disabled by the host. I don't know if you can look into that so that folks can still participate.
I think I fixed it. Can someone try? I don't know what happened in there, but I think it
Right.
is good now.
Ah,
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Hopefully I can see it as well soon. All right. So again, there are a lot of different things that you need to consider, right? Other than the typical materials and the like for your garden. We're going to take a look at a few examples in a little bit, but one of the things to consider is, does it need to be set up a little differently to be a little bit more welcoming to all? Because what may work for one part of the community may not work for another. Kids are going to be able to get down on their knees and in the dirt and dig around a lot better than, say, a senior community, right? And then placement, there's a lot of that to consider as well. Where would it be best placed? Is it going to be far away from access? Are people going to be able to get to it? Is it going to be easy to access and people can walk out and work in the garden or help themselves to what's growing? Or is it going to be a chore to get all the way out to the garden? So those are a couple of things to consider when you're thinking about diverse abilities and mobility, right? And then, of course, there's always the setup, making sure there's clear space around it. Not just for mobility, but also, it makes everything a little bit easier, a little bit more welcoming, and it can be used for different things. It doesn't always have to be a matter of working the garden itself. We're also going to take a look at different types of beds, depending on the audience. And again, kind of like I was talking about, in-ground beds might be a little bit easier for people who have better mobility or the kids. However, you need to consider what might be best for, say, a senior community who a lot of times really, really needs that. They really need that communal space to gather and to be outdoors. And another thing to consider, should it be a year-round garden or can it be dormant? Especially right about now, right? If you think about it, for those of you not in Arizona, or at least not in southern Arizona, it's extremely hot right now. And a lot of gardens don't do very well. Some will, depending on what it is you're growing. But that's another thing to consider, right? Because there's nothing wrong with a garden being dormant. Nothing wrong with that at all. You kind of let it go and maybe use it for something different in the meantime. And then when season starts to come in, the temperatures come down a little bit, you hit fall, and then you kind of start. And a lot of times you really look forward to getting that garden back up and running. We work with a lot of early childhood centers that work through the school year. So basically, August, September or so, they're starting to get their gardens back up and going because they haven't been there for the summer. So again, nothing wrong with letting it be dormant. And then, of course, because of the same thing, because of the heat, and if you do want to keep it going throughout those months, you'll have that the responsibility of making sure that either your irrigation is working or that it is free of pests or that the water didn't accidentally turn off. And we've had a couple of experiences with that ourselves. And so all of that. And the more a person works out there and takes responsibility, the more ownership. And I've had comments from people saying that they don't feel like they can go out and help themselves to harvest because they didn't put as much work in as somebody else. So again, you kind of take all of that into consideration when you are working with a garden.
and Glenda, we had a couple of people chime in the chat. So
Okay.
had a comment. We have a garden group. Clients grow everything from seed and then they eat the products. We see clients work as a team, socialize, leave the house, learn to garden, and produce their own food. We also had some comments on what would be important. Tools, water, and easy access came up. And then we also have, I also have a lot of milkweed, so monarch butterflies feel welcomed. And then we had one person chime in about dormancy. Summer's a great time for cover crop for soil fertility.
Excellent. See, and obviously, those of you who are here have, you know, an interest in gardening and using your garden and green spaces. So, and those are everything that we were looking for you to kind of share with us. Those are all important ideas to, because I think anyone who attends a webinar kind of like this comes away with something, a little something that you might not have thought of before or might not have implemented before, and you walk away with that little bit of information at least. Thank you for those comments.
We also had one more. If it's extremely hot, I taught my students to grow microgreens indoors. So we take our green space indoors when we can't be outside.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely. 100%. There's nothing wrong with bringing that inside. And that's another one of the things that we were going to hit on is if you have, you know, a versatile garden like that, smaller pots or maybe bigger ones on wheels or something like that, that gives you a little bit more to work with, right? You can have that indoor green space, so to speak. So that's wonderful. I'm really glad you shared that with us, because a lot of people will not think about the fact that you can do this inside. You can, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold, you know, take care of those little plants indoors. And then once, you know, the temperature agrees with us a little bit better, then, you know, bring them on outside. We did have one site who had a lot of theft, for example, and it may not have anything to do with weather, but they would bring their plants indoors every night, and then they would take them out every morning, and it would have been much more of a chore, except they were all on wheel casters. So they were, so it was an excellent way to take care of their garden. They just put a lot of effort into it, and the kids really got into that as well. So they knew the importance of taking care of that garden. So if you can see my screen properly here, we have a few ideas. It would be my top left, I guess. That is when we helped start a garden at our Pasquayaki Early Childhood Center. That has multiplied beyond, above and beyond. It's but they started with just a couple of beds and a few pots, and then they just kind of took it from there. And just one of the beautiful things about that is they use it a good bit for the kids for self-regulation. You know, if they're having a hard time in the classroom, they'll come out and let the kids kind of dig in the garden a little bit, take care of the plants, do a little watering, whatever it might be, to kind of help them kind of refocus and be able to come back into the classroom. And there's no, you know, that way there's no penalty involved. There's nothing negative about it. It's just a matter of allowing that child to come out into that green space, be in the outdoor area a little while, and kind of change their mood if that's what's necessary. Also, off to the right, like I was talking about, different pots, depending on what it is you'd like to grow, what your space is. We do have a lot of families who have only a small patio space, for example. And one of the things that we show our families how to do is container gardening. You can grow a lot in a container, especially, you know, herbs and that kind of thing. If you'd like to start with that, we have a lot of families also that obviously, you know, affordability is an issue. So one of the classes we teach is affordable container gardening. So and it was great. We had families that gathered up their coffee cans or anything along those lines that did not have chemicals in it before. That was very, very much a stipulation. And they created their own containers, and the kids got to decorate them, etc. So again, it creates that ownership, that buy-in when you put that work in. And it'll show families that you don't have to have a vast garden to have a garden. You know, a little outdoor patio, a little outdoor section. You can have yourself a nice little garden. My bottom left there, and a couple of my colleagues, would help put in a community garden at one of our local libraries, where there had been only rocks before that. So they were very excited to get that going. And we had community members come in and help us, not just clear the area and build it, but also plant. And so that's continuing to grow, and that's out there for anyone to come out and actually sit out there as well. That's one of the beauties of that, because it can also double as a little place to sit and read or whatever you'd like to do. Bottom right, we have a horse trough. I don't know how many of you are familiar with those, but it's just a large oval tin horse trough that's meant for water normally. But there again, you have a garden bed. You know, you can raise it up a little bit on block, on brick, and you have that contained, and it's slightly raised, right? So that way you're not having to get down on hands and knees to do your gardening, unless you're able to or like to. I kind of like to get my hands in the dirt and get down with the kids. So, okay.
We had a couple of messages in the chat.
Okay.
So one person talked about our school district has a garden and they donate the food to the local food bank, right? So we're expanding that mental wellness when we have enough to eat and when we have produce to eat and things that are nutritionally dense. Oftentimes that really helps our mental wellness too. So we can expand that programming all the way to the food bank. We had one person say they used recycled containers, just like we did in that class. Deidre from Yuma says, my garden is a habitat for using mostly native plants that bloom throughout the year and use less water. So thinking about where do you live and how much capacity do you have? Can you have a garden that uses less water and needs less attention throughout the year? We also had someone use Amazon boxes and heavy duty garbage bags to expand their garden beds and grow vegetables in them all year round. Another person said if you work at a school, the nutrition team typically has lots of large cans from food service that can be repurposed for planting. That's a great tip. It already has in it. You know that it's food safe. You had food in it. Make sure that you're looking out for those sharp edges if you're working with small kiddos, but such a great resource instead of just throwing them away. Our group built the garden beds with recycled wood. And then I'm a member of a community group in Santa Clara County. This is the second year that one rancher let us use a section of his fields. This year, around 20 families are growing different vegetables and flowers. Each family has their own space. Last year, when they harvest, they donated the vegetables to the community. Also, we had a celebration with the families and the ranchers' family and friends. How wonderful.
That's fantastic.
Such great stories. Thanks everyone for sharing that. So you can see how these gardens really help the community come together and have that community feel. And when we're thinking about mental wellness, when we feel belonging, that really helps with mental wellness. And so you can see with all of these stories how we're all coming together and helping each other to feel valued and belonging.
Thank you for all those comments. That's fantastic. I mean, I love to hear that we have all of that going on throughout. And then like Jen said, you know, depending on where we live, there are a whole lot of different things that you need to take into consideration as far as that goes. But one thing that seems to be common is community, right? Working together to make that garden thrive. Love to hear all of that. So, you know, we were talking a little bit with the pictures about the different types of garden. Now, what I'd like to kind of go over a little bit is the ideas for different settings as far as your gardens, right? For example, here in our elderly housing communities, we do have to be thoughtful, for example, about the height and shape of a garden to accommodate their mobilities and different abilities. And a lot of times that's one of the things that you also want to incorporate into working with any community, as you want to ask, what is that you need? What would make this easier for you? What would make this a little more accessible to you? If there is a garden and, or we go in and help somebody set up a garden and then we walk away and it doesn't get used, what that doesn't benefit anyone, right? So we want to make sure that the garden is fitting as far as their environment. For example, the beds need to be tall enough to sit on, used for seating or for to be able to reach across. And generally we tend to build our beds so that most anyone can reach at least to the midsection. And that way they have access to everything that's growing. And that way all abilities can participate. If someone is in a walker or a wheelchair, they can all still reach in. And you can't really see on your screen, but I'm all of like 4'11". So my reach is a little, it's a little limited, shall we say. So I take all of that into consideration, right? Excuse me. So, and with all of that, kind of like I was saying, if you have a garden but it doesn't get used, then you don't have that social interaction that usually takes place with gardening in a community. So you want to encourage that social interaction and connectedness through the design of the garden. And like we mentioned earlier, not just the garden bed itself, but the surrounding area. Can they walk around it? Is there somewhere to maybe sit and just enjoy the garden view if they're not necessarily going to walk in or rather work in the garden? Are there any tripping hazards, anything like that? Anything that's going to make it a little more difficult for someone to walk up to the garden or access the garden? A lot of the requests that we have with primarily in the elderly community are herbs and vegetables that can be planted and up high. So smaller vegetables, herbs in high built or raised beds. A couple of the ones that we've helped put in were also on wheels, so they can move them where they might find it a little bit easier to use. And of course, when you are working with any community, you want to make sure that you get their input. And a lot of the requests are often culturally significant to them, right? They will ask for culturally or regionally significant plants that they might not be able to access otherwise. And that's one of the things that we do try to also meet them, just like any other time. You're going to meet your community where they're at. And if they're not able to get certain herbs or certain vegetables that they are able to grow, that's where we'd like to help them with that, right? And another really wonderful thing that happens, and we hear this a lot, is that space, it just provides a space for cultural and familial storytelling. We hear a lot of stories about, how their parents or grandparents used to grow this and how the gardening has changed, or how it has actually remained the same. One of the things that we hear a lot is how we have so much more of a focus on growing our own food now, where, in the past, especially when you're talking to seniors, in the past, it was commonplace, maybe when they were a child. And now it's almost like we've come full circle on that. It's really a wonderful thing to see. All right, I'm going to pause to see if there's anything in the chat, because again, I'm not able to see it for some reason.
Yeah, we don't have anything in the chat, but if anyone has any ideas for specific populations that they've used successfully, or questions about specific populations and setting up a garden so that it makes sense for your population, please feel free to put that in the chat so we can use the experience and the expertise of everyone that is attending the webinar to try to find those answers for you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that we really we thrive on. Because that's how we learn. We all learn from each other. You know, it's shared ideas and shared cultural experiences and just lived experience as well, right? So all of that, we welcome it. All right, so another area that we work with a good bit is our tribal early childhood and community gardens. So again, very important to our communities is that cultural connection, right? And that's when we're talking about whole health and wellness, we have, you know, a cultural connection and being valued is very important. So you want to make sure that you are incorporating all of that in there. We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome and everyone sees themselves in that garden, right? That's a real big part of how we approach our gardening as well. You know, you want culturally valued foods, and you want, you know, your audiences, you want your participants to identify with their traditional foods. And that speaks a lot to food sovereignty, especially in our tribal communities. And I spoke a little bit earlier about self-regulation in the garden. And whether you're 5 or 85, you know, you're going to, that garden area supports a place for self-reflection, just an awareness of emotion, or just a change of environment, you know, just walking outside into that green space. It doesn't have to be, you know, extravagant, but just that change of environment from indoor to outdoor, it really makes a big difference sometimes. It just kind of just gives you a chance to kind of self-reflect a little bit, or maybe just take a breather or two, and then come back indoors and continue what you need to do. But there is such a difference when we walk outside into the garden. One of the things that I have heard even from site directors, for example, it's like, I just didn't want to be out here, but once I got out here, it changed everything. And those were such important words for me when she said that. I just thought, okay, it's proven to be true, right? That just having that space outside, that green space, makes all the difference.
We had a couple of people chime in.
Sure.
During our gardening groups, most of our clients from different cultures talk about childhood memories gardening with their family.
Yes.
In the school setting, I often reach out to families about a big harvest to see if anyone has a recipe they'd like to share or demo for students. We had a large yield of verdolagas, and we had a grandmother use it in veggie burritos that were a huge hit. I don't know if Alex, if you noticed, but verdolagas were what was growing in that horse trough in our pictures. So those are a huge hit for us too. We also have urban grower training program. Habesha Works changed my life. Teachers that look like the community being served. Yoga in the garden, movie night in the garden, overnight campouts, and beautiful bonfires in the garden. That is a wonderful story. In a garden can be so much more than just a space that you're growing things, right? Through that story, yoga, movie night, overnight campouts, bonfires, all of those community connections.
Definitely. That's just having an outdoor space like that. We have, again, another one of our sites that has started to create an outdoor classroom setting, which I think is fantastic. We did have, you know, a couple of negative comments on that is that it could be distracting. And the way I see it is distracting in a positive way, I would think. You know, if it becomes to where you can't contain the kids or adults for that matter, but you know, just being out there and giving them that different view, just a different perspective on how you can approach things and how you can approach learning for that matter. We do quite a bit outside in our garden as far as our classes go. We do our physical activity out there a lot of times. We do our lectures, and then one of the things that I have found, anytime we're doing a class indoors, if we invite people to go outside and take a walk in the garden, we pretty much lose the entire class to the outdoors for a little while, which is a great thing. But that's just it. It just gives you that change in scenery, change in environment, change in perspective, and then just breathing in a little bit of that green space air, right? A really important area that we also work with are in our treatment centers. And, you know, these have a little bit more stricter regulations, right? So it's really important for these centers to have a space for their, whether it's outpatient or resident. But a lot of these may not be conducive to growing plants, right? Because it is contained. Many times these are indoors, or at least in an indoor courtyard that might be overly shaded. But we have, you know, we can think of other things that it can be. It can be used for a tranquility space. We have one that's a rock garden, you know, or a Zen garden. Or for that matter, there are a couple of times where the participants themselves have said, well, you know, let's try and find something that will grow here. And it might have been a small thing, but for example, overly shaded or cool areas are good for growing greens, and they did just fine with that. But again, they took that ownership. They took that initiative to find something or to ask for something that would grow there so that they could take care of it. And it gave them that opportunity to help to tend to it, which is very mentally calming. And it just creates a general well-being. So, and again, same idea. If it's a shaded area, especially in our climate, shaded seating area for quiet reflection, that goes a long ways as well for, especially for somebody who is in a treatment center.
And we have a few more folks.
Great.
With people living with diabetes, it's been a chance to learn about the importance of eating healthier and the benefits of being in contact with nature. And then we had a suggestion for a bike tour, farm bike ride that connects small community gardens and end with a dinner that all the gardens contribute to. And then in school, we did composting, gardening, harvesting, and cooking, taught the students the cycle of life. The activities also expand their knowledge of food and make them try different foods from our produce. Most of all, it provides them with the experiences that enrich their background when writing, reading, and working with teams. And also chronic diseases. Yeah, great ideas, everyone. Thank you.
Really great ideas. We're going to walk away from here with a lot of good information. And I love that. The bike tours, we have after school groups come in every once in a while for a bike tour to our garden. You know, especially when you have youth that are kind of an in-between stage, maybe middle school age or so. It really makes a difference because that's where you make that connection with the youth at that age. I love all of these ideas. Thank you so much. Okay, now we'll go back a little bit to just what it takes to create and maintain the garden itself, right? How do you keep it alive and thriving, especially in our Southwest, desert Southwest in our climate, right? So we have a few things to consider. And hopefully you've all received that we included 10 steps to a successful vegetable garden as part of your handouts, as well as a low desert planting and harvest guide, calendar, I should say. And it's very specific to our Southwest climate on that calendar. But the 10 steps is a great general guide for growing anything at all. So you can do a little more than peruse it. I would really recommend you read it through, and we're always here for questions. You will have our contact information. So things to consider. You're going to be putting in a garden, right? So the number one thing, after you have buy-in and they've agreed you're going to have a garden, so water source, make sure that you have a close enough water source. We have had a couple of places that really wanted a garden, but they didn't have a water source anywhere nearby that was accessible. And there are a few things that can be done with that, because irrigation can be attached to, say, a hose if the spigot is not close enough, for example. And there are things you can do to modify that. But number one, you need to be able to have that water source, especially depending on the size of your garden. If you're going to have a garden bed, you're not always going to be able to get out there and hand water properly or enough water, depending on what it is you're growing. For a smaller, garden with a few pots, if you are the water source, perfect, excellent. Just you want to have that commitment to making sure that it is getting watered regularly. Another thing to consider is placement, especially if you're growing edibles. If you're growing edibles, you do not want runoff from a roof, for example. So you want to make sure that you place your pots or your garden bed, whatever it might be, away from a running roof. If you're growing trees or something along those lines, or plants that are not edibles, whether it's pollinators or whatever else you'd like to grow, actually a runoff might actually be a little helpful, because you might be able to harvest that water from wherever it's coming from. And of course, again, I keep saying, out here in the Southwest, water is precious. So we any chance we get, we harvest our water. Let's see. And of course, the sun. You want an equal sun, you want sun as well as shade. So you have certain plants that are going to be hardy and a little more resilient in the direct sun, but you have others that may not be so much. But you also do not want to overshade. Generally speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, 6 to 8 hours in direct sun is good for plants. And again, depending on what it is. Again, your soil, proper composition of the soil. You want moisture, but you also want to make sure that there's proper drainage. You don't want so much, you don't want soggy soil, and you also don't want to compact your soil if it's in a garden bed, or even in a pot for that matter. You want to make sure that it's well aerated. So, and all of that, first of all, you're going to want to be able to have the available space for it. So again, we were talking a little bit earlier about accessibility. You want to be able to get out into that garden space. And if it's say a garden bed, you want there to be proper access all the way around that bed, or at least 3 sides of it. Keeping in mind with kids, you want to keep in mind child safety. Right now, our program is putting together a toxic plant list, because there is, especially in early childhood centers, or even at home for that matter, there are certain things you may not want to grow, because if your young child has access to it, it may not be such a good thing. And some of those are real obvious, and some are not, but hopefully that's something that we can help with a little bit down the line as well. And there are other resources as well, as far as toxic plants and what would be best not to have, especially when young kids are around. And then we need to consider the season. There are certain things, and you will have that guide that I was talking about. Certain things can be planted and maintained and harvested within a certain season. And and that's usually, if you want to be a little more successful, you want to stay within that season. And again, that relieves a lot of stressors of not being able to grow something, because maybe it's not in season, and that's why you couldn't grow it. And then there are other things that might grow a little bit easier, and that success will also help that overall well-being in keeping your garden. And Jen, I believe, talked about it a little bit earlier on as well. the amount of required care. You don't want to add more stressors with having to tend to a garden that requires excessive care, right? So you want to make it enjoyable. You want to enjoy your garden. You want to be able to enjoy working it, maybe weeding it, trimming it, harvesting it without excess stress of just trying to keep it alive or keep it going. I'm going to pause for a few more comments if anyone has any.
If you all look in the chat, Taylor, thanks so much, has shared some of the handouts that we shared. These are, again, for Desert Southwest, and so feel free to look online, probably your cooperative extension offices or your master gardeners if you have them. We'll have some planting calendar guides and some thoughtfulness about your region and the weather and the seasons and everything that you might need to know for a successful garden.
Okay. So after we've talked about all of this, what if you figure out you don't have the capacity for a large garden, right? So somebody mentioned it in the chat a little while ago. There are various desert adapted plants that can be beautiful, but don't need a whole lot of care. And you will have access to these links as well. If you love flowers, there are flowering plants that will grow in Arizona. And a lot of people who don't know our desert, we actually have a fairly green desert for a desert. So we have a lot that can grow here. And again, it's a matter of how you do it. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. But there's always an option for what you can do. Somebody also said, growing a smaller something indoors. Picking smaller pots maybe that you can move into the shade a little bit easier. So that's where your container garden comes in. It's smaller containers. They're easy to transfer from one spot to another. So that's really, really something to keep in mind. And not everything has to be vast and as far as gardening goes. A great little herb garden or even just a pollinator garden will go a long ways into just giving you that space outside, that green space to look at and to walk out into if you need that just a change in environment. All right. We said something about growing fruit trees and shade trees. I know trees might take a little bit longer, but they would be great for seeding. You can have seed right under the shade or right off a little ways off and just enjoy being out in those trees. Again, we have a link for you for fruit trees. And fruit trees, like I was saying, if you do have access to being able to harvest water, that would be great for your trees. Any questions at all?
We don't. And I would just also offer, I think that we all we're looking for mindfulness in this presentation too. And so all of these gardening aspects that we're talking about, really, we want you to be set up for success so that when you go into this garden, it can be a present moment that you can take a breath and look at the beautiful colors or sit and play in the dirt and not worry about the state of the garden. And so really it opens us up to have more opportunity for mindfulness and for feeling calm and refreshed in a green space. We do not have any questions right now, but we would love to take some questions. We made it a little bit shorter of a presentation today, just so that, again, we like to listen to our communities and listen to the folks that we're with. So if you had particular needs or wanted to talk about something in your community that you wanted help with, we would love to take those questions and comments now.
And again, one of the things we wanted to emphasize is that a garden can be so much more than just somewhere where you're growing something. Quite literally, it can be a gathering space. And we see that a lot in our senior communities where they have a space outdoors to come out to and meet up with their fellow residents. And it makes a really big difference to that. Do we have community groups? We have community spaces, and we do have communities that we work with that come together. Is that that answers your question? We will work with community gardens as well. We've had a few neighborhood gardens that we worked with in the past and kind of help them put that together in collaboration with, say, our Master Gardener group as well from the university.
Hi, Francis. Thanks so much for asking. I think that in Yuma, it's going to be just a little bit different for you, dependent on the weather. And so I would look at 10 steps to a successful vegetable garden. That's going to have planting based on your elevation. And so it'll be a little more accurate for you.
Thank you, because I think that's it's important to really ask that part, because even in Arizona, I mean, in Arizona itself, whether you're in Yuma or you're a little bit northern, in northern Arizona, it's going to be very different as to what you can plant and what guide you can follow. And again, like Jen was saying, we want this to be successful for you and your participants, and this is what will help them feel that much better about what it is they're doing, about being out in that garden, about putting a garden together at all, for that matter.
Thank you, Betty. That's so true. We're looking for just a space to have some mental wellness time and to reset and refresh. And so garden is a wonderful space for that. And we encourage you to make it small or big or whatever fits your community.
Absolutely. Yeah, regardless, again, we talked a little bit about children in the garden. If they're having a little bit of self-regulation issues, let them go dig in the garden a little bit. I mean, and even me, I personally feel a lot better as soon as I walk outside into that. I don't even have to do a whole lot. It's just a matter of being out there and leaving whatever might have been bringing my mood down, or my stress level up, whatever it might have been. It's just that change in environment that really helps.
And I see a lot of gratitude in the chat, but I also wanted to thank you both so much for coming today and sharing your expertise, and really all the participants and how engaging and all the good ideas that you all shared as well. It was really nice to all be in the space together today. And I just wanted to also share that we will drop a link in the chat for an evaluation. If you are able to, it should take about 2 minutes or less, I think. And I will be sending out certificates for those who did attend in full today. So, of course, please stay on and ask any additional questions if you have them, but I wanted to just throw that in there too. So thank you all.
Aja, I see your question in the chat. I have not heard of it called that specifically, but we do talk a lot about food sovereignty and how to interact with the earth in a really respectful and sustainable way, but also try to repair damage done to the people and the keepers of that earth during different historical times or present times, frankly. And so that's really why we try to facilitate the ownership of a garden or a growing space for the community that we're in, so that folks do know that that is their space and they have ownership over that space, to take back their ability to grow food and have those choices again.
Yes, thank you for that. Also, Solomon is sharing that they notice clients' mental and physical benefits, such as therapeutic and de-stressing effects and better mental health. They increased with exercise and improved understanding of the role of the nutritious food and overall health, building team culture, promoting client-staff interaction, and developing positive relationships and stronger social skills among the participants. So that's fantastic. And that's what you can have, because we come together with that. You have that commonality of wanting to work in that garden and wanting to learn about the nutrition aspect of what you're growing. Thank you for that.
And I think too, with everyone's comments, thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom. That is such an important part of this. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. It can be like the green space itself is so healing and so calming. for us just as its own. And so we don't have to overcomplicate it for it to be very effective. You don't have to have the biggest garden, the greenest garden. There are things dying in our gardens all the time. That is okay. It's part of the process. It's very natural, and it's still going to serve your goals of wellness. And so start small and try to build on those successes, and reach out to your community, to us, to those around you, so that you can have that help when you need it.
Thank you for that, Jen. Like Jenny says, students with behavior challenges do well when she takes them out into the garden and outdoors. They become her strong supports in completing the work outside. And that's great. Love that. Thank you for sharing that.
I think that's it.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much. And I also want to say muchísimas gracias a todos los que estaban aquí. Nos dio mucho gusto presentarles.